Survivors didn't say it sounded like wind. They didn't say it sounded like thunder, or a train, or an explosion. When they were pulled from the rubble, covered in ash and plaster, shivering in the freezing rain, they struggled to find the words. They said it sounded like the shrieking of 10,000 demons. In 1890, there was no radar. There were no sirens. There were no cell phones to flash a warning. There was just a warm, gentle breeze. And then, total erasure. This is the story of the night Louisville, Kentucky ceased to exist. To understand the death of a city, you first have to understand its life. And in the spring of 1890, Louisville was more than just alive. It was booming. It was the gateway to the South, a titan of industry sitting on the banks of the Ohio River. If you walked down Main Street on a Tuesday afternoon, you would be assaulted by the sounds of progress, the clatter of iron-rimmed carriage wheels on cobblestones, the shouting of merchants, the smell of curing tobacco and distilling whiskey. This was a city built on brick and iron. It was solid. It was permanent. The Victorian architecture was designed to scream wealth and stability, but the very bricks that signified their wealth would soon become their tomb. We look back at history and we see black and white photos, distant, static. But I want you to close your eyes for a second. Put yourself there. It's March 27th, a Thursday. You are walking home from work, but something feels wrong. It's March, but you aren't wearing a coat. You're sweating. The air is heavy, sticky. It feels like New Orleans in July, not Kentucky in early spring. The thermometer is reading nearly 70 degrees. People are out on their porches. Windows are thrown open to catch the breeze. Children are playing in the streets, delighted by this false spring. They don't know it yet, but this heat is a trap. To the west, hundreds of miles away, a massive cold front is charging across the plains. It is a wall of freezing, dense air, colliding violently with the warm, moist air sitting over the Ohio Valley. In modern meteorology, we call this a triple point, a volatile mix of shear, instability, and lift. But in 1890, they called it unsettled weather. The U.S. Signal Service, the grandfather of the National Weather Service, was in its infancy. They didn't have satellites. They had telegraphs, they had barometers, and they had a flag. A single, square flag. The signal officer, Mr. Strong, observed the falling barometer with great concern. The mercury was dropping faster than he had ever seen. The air was thick, charged with electricity. Yet, he hesitated. To raise the alarm for a cyclone would cause panic, and if he was wrong, he would be the laughingstock of the city. He hesitated, and while he hesitated, the sky began to change. It wasn't just gray, it was bruised. Survivors later described the color of the sky as something unnatural, a sickly, luminous copper green, like an old penny sitting at the bottom of a well. The birds stopped singing. The horses, usually so steady in the city traffic, began to whinny and stomp. They could feel the pressure dropping in their ears. Can you imagine that feeling? That deep, instinctive urge to run, but having nowhere to go? This is a good moment to pause, because what happens next? The investigation into why so many people died and how the city was rebuilt is a story we are going to tell in detail. Back to 70s p.m. The sun has set. The gas lamps flickering on Main Street are struggling against the wind. But life goes on. At the Falls City Hall, on the west side of town, the lights are bright. This is the heart of the community. Tonight, it is full of life. The local lodge is holding a meeting on the upper floor. But downstairs? Downstairs is where the joy is. It's a dance class, a celebration. Mothers are sitting in chairs along the walls, fanning themselves in the heat, watching their children learn the waltz. 75 children, little girls in their best Sunday dresses, boys in stiff collars, trying not to step on toes. The music is playing, a piano, a fiddle, laughter bouncing off the high brick walls. Among them is Mary, 10 years old. She begged her mother to let her come tonight. She wanted to show off her new shoes. Her mother, exhausted from the heat, almost said no, almost kept her home, but she said yes. And now, Mary is spinning in the center of the room, dizzy with excitement. The music was so loud. We didn't hear the wind at first. We were laughing. The hall was warm, stiflingly warm. I remember looking at the windows. They were black, pitch black, like someone had painted over them with tar. And then the glass started to vibrate. The glass wasn't just vibrating, it was singing. At 7:55 p.m., just a few miles to the west, the monster touches down. It starts in the Parkland area, a suburb. At first, it doesn't look like a tornado. It looks like a boiling mass of clouds lowering itself to the earth. It is wrapped in rain, hidden. Most people in Parkland are eating dinner. They hear a roar, but they think it's a train on the nearby tracks. But trains don't sound like that. Trains have a rhythm. Clack, 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 clack. This sound has no rhythm. It is a constant, grinding scream. The funnel is widening. It is hungry. It consumes a farmhouse in seconds. Explodes it. We aren't talking about a roof being blown off. We are talking about total molecular disintegration. The pressure inside the vortex is so low that buildings don't just blow over. They explode outward. The air inside the house tries to equalize with the vacuum outside, and the walls simply burst. Back at Falls City Hall, the music stops, not because the song ended, but because the piano player stopped playing. The gas lamps are flickering. The flame, usually steady, is dancing wildly inside the glass globe. Then it turns blue. Then it goes out. Darkness. A collective gasp from the mothers. A few children giggle, thinking it's a game. "Stay where you are," a father shouts from the doorway. "It's just the wind." It went quiet. That was the worst part. The wind outside just stopped. It was a vacuum. My ears popped painfully. I looked at my mother, and her hair. Her hair was standing up on end. Static electricity. The air tasted metallic, like putting a penny on your tongue. That silence, that is the eye of the beast breathing in. The tornado is now crossing into the city proper. It has grown. It is no longer a narrow rope. It is a wedge, a half-mile wide grinder moving at 40 miles per hour. It is tearing through the West End neighborhood. It is chewing through brick homes like they are made of wet cardboard, and it is heading directly, mathematically, for the Falls City Hall. Let's track the path. It hits 18th Street, gone. It hits Magazine Street, gone. It hits Chestnut Street. Reverend Steve Minigorode is at his church nearby. He is standing at the pulpit. He looks up, and he sees the roof of his church lift. He doesn't say it flew off. He says it lifted. It was as if a giant hand had reached down, grabbed the lid of a box, and simply removed it. I looked up, and instead of the timber rafters, I saw the swirling vortex of hell itself. Horses, wagons, trees, spinning in the darkness above my head. The Reverend dives under a pew. The stained glass windows implode. Shards of colored glass turn into shrapnel, embedding themselves in the pews, the floor, the Bible on the lectern. But the Reverend is lucky, because 3 blocks away, at the hall, the luck has run out. The parents inside realize too late that this isn't a thunderstorm. The roar is deafening now. It shakes the floorboards. It rattles the teeth in their skulls. A mother screams for her child. "Mary, get away from the window!" But Mary can't move. She is frozen, watching the black glass bow inward. The structural integrity of Falls City Hall relied on its thick brick walls. But brick is brittle. It has no give. It has no flex. When a 200-mile-per-hour wind hits a brick wall broadside, it acts like a battering ram. The sound changed. It went from a roar to a crash, a grinding, tearing sound. The bricks above the stage, they didn't fall. They shot across the room like cannonballs. The entire rear wall of the building, 3 stories of solid masonry, separates from the foundation. Gravity takes over. Tons, literal tons of brick, mortar, and timber begin to fall, directly onto the dance floor, directly onto the children. But the horror isn't just the collapse. It's what happens next. The floor of the dance hall, the very ground these children are standing on, cannot support the weight of the collapsing roof. The floor joists snap, snap, like twigs. And the entire room, the dancers, the mothers, the piano, the debris, plunges downward. They fall into the basement, into the dark. And then, the rest of the building comes down on top of them. Silence. For a heartbeat, there is silence at Falls City Hall. But the storm isn't done. It hasn't even reached downtown yet. It hasn't reached the water tower. It hasn't reached the Union Depot. It is just getting started. It moves on, leaving the hall as a pile of rubble in the darkness. Inside that pile, underneath 20 feet of brick, a child starts to cry, then another, then a scream. We were buried. I couldn't move my legs. I couldn't see anything. I could only hear. I heard my mother calling my name, but her voice, it sounded so far away. And then I smelled it. The gas. The illumination of 1890. Louisville was provided by coal gas. Pipes ran through the walls, under the floors. When the building collapsed, the pipes sheared off. Now, in the pitch black, odorless, flammable gas is hissing into the pockets of air where the survivors are trapped, and somewhere in that rubble, a single oil lamp is still burning. The storm is moving east, towards the heart of the city, towards the unimaginable wealth of Main Street. The beast is tearing through the business district now. The Union Depot, a massive structure, a symbol of transportation and power. The roof is torn off like a sheet of paper. Iron beams are twisted into pretzels. People waiting for the evening train are sucked out onto the tracks. The telegraph lines are down. The city is cut off from the world. No one outside of Louisville knows what is happening. And inside Louisville, no one knows if they are next. The wind is screaming so loud that people in the east end of the city, just a few miles away, still think it's just a heavy thunderstorm. They are sitting in their parlors, drinking tea, reading the evening paper. They have no idea that a mile away, their city is being decapitated. They have no idea that the water tower, the giant limestone pillar that provides pressure to every hydrant in the city, is directly in the path of the vortex. If that tower falls, the hydrants run dry. If the hydrants run dry, the firefighters are useless. And remember the gas leaking into the rubble at Falls City Hall? Remember that burning lamp? The wind is about to stop, but the fire is just beginning. This was the end of the world, and you are standing in the middle of it. We are back in the dark. We are back in the basement of the Falls City Hall. Time has lost its meaning here, above ground, in the world of the living. Only seconds have passed since the roof collapsed, but down here, in the suffocating blackness, every second stretches into an eternity. Let's slow down. Let's freeze this moment. You are trapped. You are lying at an awkward angle. Your legs are pinned. You can feel a heavy weight on your chest, pressing the air out of your lungs. You try to take a breath, but the air is thick with dust. It tastes like old plaster, like pulverized brick. It coats your tongue. It fills your nose. You cough, but the coughing hurts because your ribs are bruised. And then, you hear them. The sounds of the living buried with the dead. At first, it is just a low moaning, a collective sound of confusion, people waking up from the concussion of the impact. Then, the realization sets in. A woman's voice cuts through the dust, high, panicked. "My baby! Has anyone seen my baby? She was wearing a blue ribbon. She was right here. Please, someone. She was right here." The darkness is absolute. You cannot see your hand in front of your face. You can only feel the jagged edges of broken timber, the cold roughness of brick, and the warm, sticky fluid that is dripping from somewhere above you. And then the smell hits you. It isn't the smell of blood. It isn't the smell of rain. It is a sharp, pungent, chemical smell, like rotten eggs, coal gas. The main line has ruptured. A pipe, 3 inches in diameter, has snapped clean off. It is pumping highly flammable gas into the pocket of air where 75 children and their mothers are trapped. The gas is heavier than air. It is sinking. It is filling the voids in the rubble. It is creeping into your nose, your mouth. It makes you dizzy. And somewhere in that darkness, a single oil lamp, miraculously, terrifyingly, is still flickering. The flame is dancing. It is hungry for oxygen. And it is surrounded by fuel. I saw the glow first, a faint orange light reflecting off the dust. And I knew what it meant. I tried to scream. Put it out, for God's sake, put it out. But my voice was just a croak. The dust had swallowed it. The physics of a gas explosion are simple. Fuel, oxygen, ignition. At Falls City Hall, the conditions are perfect. Whoosh! It isn't a detonation. It is a flash fire, a wave of heat that sears the lungs. The fire moves through the rubble like a living thing, chasing the gas lines, igniting the timber, the flooring, the dresses. The screams change pitch. They are no longer screams of fear. They are screams of agony. Above ground, the storm is raging. The wind is howling so loud that the people outside cannot hear the people inside burning alive. This is the definition of hell. But the tornado does not stop to watch its work. It does not care. It is a machine, a heat engine fueled by the clash of air masses. It is moving northeast. It is moving at 40 miles per hour. That is 58 feet per second. Count with me. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. In 3 seconds, it has traveled the length of a city block. It is crossing from the residential West End into the commercial district. The streets are changing. The wooden cottages are gone. Now, we are in the land of brick and iron. Market Street, Jefferson Street, Main Street. These are the arteries of Louisville. They are lined with 4-story, 5-story buildings. Warehouses filled with tobacco. Distilleries filled with bourbon. Dry goods stores filled with textiles. Now, we need to talk about pressure. When a tornado of this magnitude, what we would today call an F4, moves through a city, it creates a massive pressure deficit. The air pressure inside the funnel is significantly lower than the air pressure inside the buildings. Nature hates a vacuum. It wants to equalize. So, as the eye of the storm passes over a warehouse, the air inside the warehouse suddenly pushes outward with tremendous force. It wants to join the storm. The windows go first. I was on the 3rd floor of the tobacco warehouse. The windows, they didn't break in, they blew out. It looked like the building was sneezing. Glass showered down onto the street like diamonds. And then, the walls started to breathe. The walls breathed. The brick walls, solid masonry, actually flexed. And then, they failed. We aren't talking about a few bricks falling. We are talking about cascade failure. When the outer wall of a 5-story building collapses, the floors inside lose their support. Pancaking. Floor 5 hits floor 4. Floor 4 hits floor 3. Floor 3 hits floor 2. Thousands of pounds of oak beams, iron machinery, and hogsheads of tobacco crashing down in a domino effect of destruction. And in the street below, a carriage driver is fighting his horses. The horses are blinded by the dust. They are rearing up. The driver is whipping them, trying to outrun the roar behind him. He looks back. I looked over my shoulder and I saw it. It wasn't a funnel anymore. It was a wall, a black, churning wall of debris. I saw a roof spinning in the air, a whole roof, and then a streetcar. It lifted a streetcar off the tracks, turned it sideways, and threw it through the front of a store. The streetcar he saw, that was the Market Street line. It weighed tons, and the wind treated it like a child's toy. The driver whips his horses again. They bolt. They run blindly down the street, their hooves sparking on the cobblestones. Just behind them, the buildings are peeling away. The noise is incredible. It is a physical weight. It vibrates in your chest cavity. It rattles your vision. Survivors said it felt like the air itself was punching them. And now, the monster reaches the crown jewel of Louisville's transportation network, the Union Depot. This was a cathedral of the industrial age, a massive train station, high ceilings, iron trusses, huge glass skylights. It was busy. It was 8:15 p.m. The evening trains were loading. People were saying goodbye to loved ones. Businessmen were checking their pocket watches. Conductors were punching tickets. They felt the air pressure drop first. Their ears popped. Then, the skylights exploded. It rained glass. That's the only way to describe it. 1 second, I was looking at the schedule board. The next, I was covered in shards. I looked up and the roof was gone. The sky was right there. A boiling, green, Sky. The iron trusses, massive girders designed to hold tons of weight, were twisted into corkscrews. The wind entered the great hall of the station and turned it into a centrifuge. Luggage, benches, signs, people. They were lifted. A man holding a suitcase was sucked out of the waiting room and deposited onto the tracks, 100 yards away. He was still holding the suitcase. The train cars sitting on the tracks, heavy iron beasts, were rocked back and forth. One car, fully loaded with passengers, was tipped over on its side. Inside that car, it is pandemonium. People are thrown against the windows. Luggage falls from the overhead racks. The lights go out. And outside, the wind is sandblasting the paint off the metal. Imagine the sound of gravel being thrown against a metal sheet. Now multiply that by 1,000. That is the sound of the debris field hitting the train. Bricks from nearby buildings are acting like missiles. They are punching through the metal skin of the train car. But the storm isn't satisfied. It wants more. It crosses 7th Street. It crosses 6th Street. It is heading for the heart of the business district. Here. The buildings are taller, more expensive. The Board of Trade building. The Courier-Journal building. The journalists inside the newspaper building are working on the morning edition. They are writing about the unsettled weather. Suddenly, the windows of the newsroom blow out. Papers, thousands of sheets of newsprint, are sucked out into the vortex. They will be found later, miles away, in fields in Indiana. Ghostly messages from a city that is being destroyed. One of the editors, Henry Watterson, a legend in journalism, dives under his heavy oak desk. He listens as his city is taken apart. It sounded like the earth was grinding its teeth. I heard the crash of the building next door. The sound of masonry striking the street is unique. It is a dull, heavy thud. And I heard it 1,000 times in a minute. Thud, thud, thud. My city was falling down around my ears. But amidst the chaos of falling bricks and twisting iron, there is a silent killer emerging. A killer more dangerous than the wind. We need to talk about the water. Louisville, like every major Victorian city, relied on a pressurized water system. Water was pumped from the river, up to a massive reservoir and a standpipe tower on Zorn Avenue. This tower, the water tower, was a marvel of engineering. A giant limestone pillar, almost 200 feet tall. Inside it was a standpipe that regulated the water pressure for the entire city. It was the heartbeat of the fire department. As long as that tower stood, the hydrants had pressure. As long as the hydrants had pressure, the firefighters could fight the inevitable fires. The tornado knows this. It creates a direct path toward Zorn Avenue. It is 8:25 p.m. The tower stands alone on a hill, a white sentinel against the black sky. The wind hits it with everything it has. Now, limestone is strong under compression. It can hold a lot of weight, but it is weak under tension. It is weak against shear force. The wind pushes against the side of the tower, pushing, pushing, pushing. The mortar joints, weakened by years of weather, begin to crack. A hairline fracture appears at the base, then another. The wind screams higher. The pressure drops lower. I saw the tower sway. I swear to you, I saw stone sway like a sapling. It leaned slowly at first, and then it just gave up. Crack. The sound is louder than the thunder. It is the sound of geology breaking. The massive limestone column, thousands of tons of rock, topples over. It smashes into the pumping station below. It crushes the machinery. It destroys the boilers. And instantly, the pressure in the city's water mains drops to zero. 0 miles away, in the burning ruins of Falls City Hall. A firefighter connects his hose to a hydrant. He spins the valve. He expects a rush of water to fight the flames consuming the trapped children. He gets a trickle, then nothing. He spins the valve frantically. Water! Give me water! But there is no water. The artery has been cut. The city is bleeding out. The firefighter looks at the hose in his hand. Then he looks at the fire. He realizes, with a cold pit in his stomach, that they are helpless. The city is made of wood and brick. It is fueled by gas. And now, it has no water. The tornado has not just damaged the city. It has disarmed it. It has left it naked and vulnerable to the fires that are springing up everywhere. Let's zoom out. If you were a bird or an angel, flying above Louisville at 8:30 p.m., what would you see? You would see a scar, a jagged, black, smoking scar cutting diagonally across the city. To the north and south of the scar, the lights are still on, people are still eating dinner, unaware that a mile away, their neighbors are dead. But inside the scar, it is total darkness. The street lamps are gone, the houses are gone, the only light comes from the fires, small orange dots that are growing larger by the second. They are merging, forming pools of light that illuminate the devastation. And the sound, the roar of the tornado, is fading now. It is crossing the river, heading into Indiana to kill again. But the noise in Louisville hasn't stopped. It has just changed. It is the sound of the aftermath. It is the sound of sirens, horse-drawn fire wagons, clanging their bells uselessly. It is the sound of dogs barking, thousands of dogs sensing the fear, and it is the sound of voices. I crawled out of what was left of my parlor. The roof was in the cellar. I stood up on a pile of bricks. It was raining. A cold, freezing rain. I looked down the street. It looked like a mouth with missing teeth. Every third house was just gone. And from every pile of rubble, I heard names, people calling out names. Sarah, John, Mother. It was a chorus of names. The warm sector is gone. The cold front has arrived. The temperature is plummeting. 10 minutes ago, it was 70 degrees. Now, it is dropping into the 40s. Soon, it will be freezing. The survivors, wet from the rain, covered in sweat and mud, begin to shiver. They are standing in their nightclothes. Some are naked, the wind having stripped the clothes right off their bodies. They are walking like zombies, stumbling over debris, cutting their bare feet on glass. They are converging on the ruins. At the Falls City Hall, the fire is growing. Men are running towards the pile. They don't have tools. They don't have heavy machinery. They have their hands. They start digging. They are tearing at the bricks with their bare fingers. They are pulling at jagged timber. Their fingernails break. Their hands bleed. But they don't stop. They can hear the children screaming underneath. Faster! A man yells. Dig faster! They form a bucket line, but they don't have buckets. They pass chunks of brick, one by one, hand to hand. A man finds a shoe, a small, white shoe. He holds it up in the flickering light of the fire. He looks for the owner, but there is only more rubble. He throws the shoe aside and keeps digging. This is the moment where the shock wears off, and the horror sets in. This is the moment where the adrenaline dumps, and the pain begins. Across the city, the scope of the disaster is becoming clear. It isn't just one building. It isn't just one block. It is the tobacco district. It is the warehouses. It is the churches. It is the schools. Reports are starting to trickle in to the police headquarters. The Union Depot is gone. St. John's Church is gone. The water tower is down. The police chief, sitting at his desk, listens to the reports. He looks at the map of his city. He takes a pencil, and he draws a line, a slash, from the southwest to the northeast. He stares at the line. He knows what is under that line. Thousands of people. He puts the pencil down. His hand is shaking. God help us. God help us all. There aren't enough doctors. There aren't enough hearses. There aren't enough coffins in the whole state of Kentucky for what is out there tonight. The wind has stopped. The rain is falling softly now. The dust is settling, coating everything in a gray shroud. And in the distance, the fires are getting brighter. The monster has passed. The beast has eaten its fill. But for Louisville, the nightmare is not over. The long, cold, dark night has just begun. The wind has moved on. The monster has left the room, but it left the door open. And through that door walks a new kind of horror. It is 9 p.m. The city of Louisville is pitch black, save for the localized infernos burning in the wreckage. The temperature has dropped 30 degrees in an hour. The rain that follows the storm is not the warm, tropical rain of the afternoon. It is icy, needle-like. It mixes with the soot and the dust to create a black slime that coats everything. We are going to stay at Falls City Hall for a moment, because what is happening there, right now, is a microcosm of the human condition. The building is a tomb, but it is a noisy tomb. The gas fires are licking at the edges of the debris pile. The rescuers, fathers, brothers, strangers, are frantic. They are throwing bricks over their shoulders, not caring where they land. We worked like madmen. We didn't speak. We just dug. Every time we moved a beam, the pile would shift. And every time the pile shifted, the screaming from below would get louder. It was a torture I wouldn't wish on the devil himself. To hear a child cry for help, and to know that moving the stone to save them might crush them. They need light. They need to see where to dig, but they can't strike a match. The air smells too strongly of gas, so they work by the light of the burning buildings next door. The orange glow casts long, dancing shadows. It makes the wreckage look like a landscape on the moon. Twisted iron looks like alien vegetation. Piles of bricks look like craters. And in the middle of this nightmare, the best and the worst of humanity begin to surface. Looting. It seems impossible to believe that while people are dying, while a city is bleeding, there are those who see opportunity. But in 1890, just like in every disaster in human history, the vultures come out. Men with sacks are moving through the shadows of Main Street. They aren't looking for survivors. They are looking for safes that have been blown open. They are looking for jewelry on the bodies of the dead. Officer Daly reported spotting 2 men near the ruins of the Union Depot. They were bending over the body of a well-dressed woman. Daly thought they were checking for a pulse. Then he saw the glint of a knife. They were cutting the rings off her swollen fingers. This is the Wild West aspect of the disaster. The breakdown of civil order. The police force is overwhelmed. The fire department is impotent without water. The city is essentially lawless. Mayor Charles Jacob declares martial law, though he has no way to broadcast it. He issues a verbal order to the police. Shoot to kill. Shoot to kill. Any man found looting the dead is to be shot on sight. No trial, no jury, just a bullet in the dark. This adds a new layer of tension to the night. The rescuers digging in the rubble have to be careful. If they are seen rummaging through a destroyed storefront looking for tools or bandages, they might be mistaken for thieves. Let's move to the hospitals. Or, rather, what passes for hospitals. The city hospital is flooded with casualties, but it's full within an hour. So, they turn the hotels into triage centers. The Galt House, the Louisville Hotel. Imagine the lobby of a 5-star Victorian hotel. Velvet carpets, crystal chandeliers, polished mahogany desks. Now, cover that floor in mud. Lay hundreds of bleeding, wet, shivering bodies on that velvet. The air is filled with the smell of iodine, whiskey, and gangrene. There is no anesthesia. There is no penicillin. There are no x-rays. Doctors are performing amputations on billiard tables. They are sewing scalps back on by candlelight. I held the lantern for Dr. Yandel. He was working on a young man whose leg had been crushed by a beam. The boy was awake. He was staring at the ceiling, reciting the Lord's Prayer over and over again. When the saw cut through the bone, he didn't scream. He just stopped praying, and he stared at me. I will never forget that look. It was a look of total betrayal, as if he couldn't believe the world could hurt him this much. The night drags on. 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight. The fires eventually burn themselves out, or are contained by the rain. The digging slows down. Exhaustion takes over. The voices from the rubble at Falls City Hall become fewer, fainter, and then, one by one, they stop. Dawn. Friday, March 28th, 1890. The sun rises over the Ohio Valley. It is a crisp, clear morning. The sky is a brilliant mocking blue, and for the first time, the people of Louisville can see what happened to them. During the night, the horror was acoustic. It was tactile. Now, it is visual. The path of the tornado is a scar etched into the earth. It is 300 yards wide and cuts a diagonal line through the city's heart. Inside this line, the destruction is absolute. Outside the line, life is untouched. A house on one side of the street is flattened. The house across the street has its flower pots still sitting on the porch railing. Survivors wander out into the light. They look like ghosts. They are covered in a gray paste of ash and plaster. They walk towards the downtown district. And they stop. Because the landmarks they use to navigate are gone. Where is the Union Depot? It was right there. No, that's a pile of bricks. That's the depot. Photographers swarm the scene. This was the golden age of disaster photography. They set up their tripods. They capture the images that we are looking at today. Look at this photo of Falls City Hall. Really look at it. It looks like a dollhouse that has been stepped on. You can see the wallpaper on the exposed interior walls. You can see a chair, sitting precariously on a ledge, 3 stories up, and down below, you see the men. Standing in their bowler hats and coats, staring at the pile. They look small, insignificant. The cleanup begins immediately. But it is not a cleanup of debris. It is a harvest of the dead. The official death toll begins to climb, 20, 40, 60. The morgues are overflowing. They have to use an ice warehouse to store the bodies. Families line up outside the ice warehouse. They go in, one by one, to walk down the rows. They are looking for a face, a ring, a birthmark. Many of the bodies are unrecognizable. The violence of the wind, the crushing weight of the bricks, and the fire have erased their identities. Unidentified female, approx. 10 years old, wearing a blue ribbon. That's Mary, the girl from the dance. Her mother finds her. The wailing that comes from the ice warehouse echoes through the entire city. But amidst the grief, a question starts to bubble up. First in whispers, then in the newspapers, then in the streets. Why? Why did so many people die? Why did the buildings fall so easily? Why didn't we know it was coming? This brings us to the investigation. Let's look at the why. The Victorian era was an era of hubris. They believed they had conquered nature. They built with brick and stone because they believed it was invincible. But from a structural engineering standpoint, unreinforced masonry is one of the worst materials to be inside during a tornado. Think about a brick wall. It is held together by gravity and mortar. The mortar is just glue. When the wind hits a wooden house, the wood flexes. It bends, it creaks. It absorbs the energy. When the wind hits a brick wall, the brick resists. It fights the wind until it can't. And then it snaps. The buildings in Louisville didn't have steel rebar. They didn't have reinforced concrete cores. They were stacks of heavy clay blocks. When the roof, which acts as a diaphragm to hold the walls together, lifted off, the walls became freestanding, and a freestanding brick wall, 50 feet high, has almost no lateral stability. A child could push it over. The tornado didn't just blow these buildings down. It exploited a fatal flaw in Victorian architecture. It turned the city's strength into its weakness. And then there is the weather service, the signal service. Why didn't they raise the flag? We found the official report from the signal officer, Mr. Strong. The conditions were ambiguous. The barometer was low, yes, but to sound the alarm for a cyclone requires certainty. To cause a panic in a city of this size, with the potential for looting and chaos, based on a mere fluctuation in the mercury, I deemed it imprudent. Imprudent. He was afraid of being wrong. He was afraid of the cry wolf effect. But there is deeper science here. The 1890 outbreak wasn't just a Louisville event. It was a massive system. It spawned 26 tornadoes across the Midwest. Meteorologists today, looking back at the data, see a classic hook echo pattern in the barometric readings. They see a low-pressure system that deepened explosively as it crossed the Mississippi River. They see a dry line punching into the warm, moist air over Kentucky. Mr. Strong didn't have radar. He didn't have satellites. But he had the telegraph. He had reports from towns to the west, towns that had been hit an hour earlier. He knew something was coming, but the bureaucracy of the time moved slower than the wind. The telegrams sat on desks. The decision to raise the warning flag was debated, and while they debated, the sky turned green. This failure, this hesitation, would be the catalyst for change. The public outrage was massive. They demanded a better system. Within a year, the Signal Service was transferred to the Department of Agriculture and renamed the U.S. Weather Bureau. The mandate changed. The priority shifted from observing the weather to predicting it, to warning the public. The death of Louisville gave birth to modern, severe weather forecasting. But let's go back to the human cost, the numbers. Official death toll, 76. But historians, and the people who were there, know that number is a lie. 76 is the number of identified white citizens who were counted. It doesn't account for the poor. It doesn't account for the African American population in the West End tenements who were often overlooked by the press. It doesn't account for the people who died of their injuries weeks later. The real number? It's likely double that. Maybe triple. Hundreds of people erased. The funerals were held en masse. On Sunday, the city shut down. The church bells rang continuously. Processions of hearses moved through the streets. But the most heartbreaking sight was the small white coffins. So many children died at Falls City Hall. An entire generation of a neighborhood, gone in seconds. There is a story of a father, a rugged tobacco worker, who walked behind 3 hearses, one for his wife, one for his daughter, one for his son. He walked alone. He had no one left to hold his hand. And yet, the city survived. Louisville is a river city. It is tough. The rebuilding began before the fires were even out. They cleared the bricks, they salvaged the iron, and they rebuilt. But they rebuilt differently. They started using steel frames. They started anchoring the roofs to the walls. They rebuilt the water tower. You can still see it today. The Zorn Avenue Water Tower. It stands there, white and gleaming, looking out over the river. It was rebuilt within a year, a symbol of defiance. You can knock us down, it says, but we will get back up. And the Falls City Hall, it was never rebuilt. The lot stood empty for a long time, a scar that refused to heal. Today, there are new buildings there, new lives. People walk over that ground every day. They park their cars, they check their phones. They have no idea that beneath their feet, 75 souls were lost in the dark. So, what is the legacy of the night of March 27, 1890? Is it the changes in meteorology? Is it the architectural lessons? No. The legacy is the reminder. We live in a world where we feel safe. We have apps that tell us when it will rain. We have sirens. We have reinforced basements. We feel invincible. But nature is patient, and nature is powerful. The people of Louisville felt invincible too. They had their brick walls. They had their booming economy. They had their false spring. But all it took was one shift in the wind, one collision of air masses, and the gilded cage was shattered. The next time you feel a warm breeze in March, the next time the sky turns that strange, bruised shade of green, the next time the birds stop singing, don't check your phone, don't wait for the siren, just listen. Listen for the sound of the train that isn't there. Listen for the shrieking of the demons. And remember the night Louisville died.